You are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Hey, welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. We are here once again, just like any other time. We have another special guest. This time, locally, San Antonio, we have our special guest, Mandy Pallock, here in the studio right here in San Antonio, Texas. And I'm so excited to have her on today because today we're going to discover her amazing book, The Question Habit. And if you're really into just faith and just getting your life together, this is something that will help you with your relationships. But a little bit about her. She is a writer, she's a speaker, and also a podcaster herself. She is the co-creator of Life Purpose Planning for high schoolers and young adults. She has 20 plus years of experience in nonprofit, print, and digital communication. She has written for some pretty awesome organizations, and she has a resume that probably take me 30 minutes to go over. So first and foremost, I want to welcome Mandy to the show and say how you doing today.
Oh, thanks so much, Shamaya. On a scale of 1 to 10, I might be a 17 and a half. I'm pretty excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited that you are excited because in today's world, we need a little bit more happy people who are positive. So I'm excited to explore your background and what got you motivated to take the direction to author this book.
Yeah. So I was actually that quiet, shy kid that avoided conversations. And I remember growing up, we had this big 12-passenger van that we called the Giant Red Tomato. And in it, I would sit the farthest away from the driver's seat in the back left because I could read a book or I could have a daydream or I could just kind of be in my own little world. And I have this really intentional, tenacious dad who would consistently invite me into that seat behind the driver's seat, and we called that the talking seat because if you were there, you were going to be a part of the conversation. And so that was my natural spot, is avoid the conversation, sit in the back, pull back, because I didn't like being asked questions. I didn't like being put on the spot. I felt like if somebody didn't like my answer, did that mean they didn't like me? And so my inclination was just to pull myself away. But as I got consistently voluntold to sit in that talking seat, I discovered that questions were this great way to get the process going. And then I discovered something I found sneakily awesome, which was if I asked the question first, then somebody else would do the talking. So that's how I first got into asking questions, was just completely as a way to try to get somebody else talking instead of me. But along the way, discovering, wait a minute, this person is amazing. Wait a minute, I'd never heard that story. Wait a minute, I really want to know more. And so that's how conversations and questions really started for me, and it's just grown from there.
I love the fact that you just have this upbeat, positive energy. Where did you get that from? Was that something that you always had when you were growing up, or was that something that you kind of knew to learn to grow into as far as family and community?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, I went from a big extroverted family. I am the introvert in an extrovert family. And so I think some of it was survival. But really, when you look at it, I think the joy of the Lord is a real thing. And when we wake up every morning, we get the opportunity to say, hey, God, what are you doing? Where are you at work? Because we know that God is at work. We know he's doing things. And it's this awesome, wonderful adventure to pray, hey, would you include me in what you're already doing? And when we come into, as believers, into this prayer of, would you include me in what you're already doing? We've got this open-handed openness to what God has for us that day, and that's a pretty good adventure.
Before we get into the book, the Question Habit, let's talk about your experience with being part of nonprofit and print digital communication, because this book is all about relationships. But I'm pretty sure your personal experience also kind of ties into how this book was formed.
Yeah, for sure. So I didn't know what I was going to be when I grew up. because I loved too many things, and commitment sounded really scary and really hard. So I talk a bit about purpose and passions, and I was that nerd who basically took 5 different career paths and wrote a 5-year plan for each one because I needed to go down the road. And in the process of that, discovered that the thing I could not do was write. And God has expanded that to communication. But in that process, fresh out of high school, I snagged an internship with a nonprofit in Oklahoma City that was focused on providing character-based resources. And so, but what that meant for me as, an aspiring, let's go change the world, idealistic and very inexperienced teenager, was that we had this opportunity to create monthly resources and put it out. And that was every month a chance to get better, every month a chance to learn, every month to experience what is it like in a nonprofit environment, and for all the pros and cons of that, and what does it look like to be in that vision-fueled environment. So that was my introduction to print. And, back in the Quark Express days and Photoshop 2.0 and 4.0, and a pretty great experience. And I'm grateful for it.
You also, you kind of teased it earlier, but you also are someone who has faith, and you believe in God, and you are someone who they're not ashamed to testify who they are as a person. And I know the show, we interview all walks of life, but that's what the show is about, getting people's perspectives and their stories. As a person of faith, how has that kind of equipped you to be not just a leader, but to also write books like this that helps people with their relationships?
It's 100% foundational and fundamental. I love the quote that C.S. Lewis said. So C.S. Lewis is the writer of The Chronicles of Narnia and some other great works. And he said, "There are no ordinary people. We have never spoken with a mere mortal." And I love that reminder that you, Shemaiah, are an immortal soul and so amazingly unordinary, and that your listeners are so amazingly unordinary. And when we bring that perspective, that awareness, that awe to a conversation, I think it really forms and fashions. It really forms how we have that conversation. When I come into a conversation with someone I disagree with, but I know this is a person who is not ordinary. This is a person who is made in the image of God from that faith perspective, then I want to handle that conversation with care and curiosity and really foster a safe, resilient relationship, not an antagonistic one.
Once again, listen, I Am Refocused Radio, talking to our guest today, Mandy Pallock, and that's a perfect segue into the title of the book, The Question Habit. Let's dive into what was the process like for you to organize the chapters in the book? How did you kind of break that down for yourself bit by bit?
Yeah, it was hard, and I had to do it a few different ways to kind of see which way stuck. And I discovered long ago the beauty of an outline and the beauty of kind of creating those snippets so that you could flesh it out and then see, was this the logical way to do it? So, Shemaiah, I did it a couple different ways, organized it, but the way that it ended up being organized the most usefully in the book is to first have a part 1 that talks about the why. Like, why do we even care about being curious? And not just because we've been told that questions are great and we learn about the 5 questions we should ask in English class, but really foundationally, why? Questions are amazing, that we're made to be curious people and that God designed us to be curious. And when we ask questions, we're absolutely doing what God designed us to do. And so, part 1 is the why, and then part 2 is, well, how, right? You might be an introvert, you might be an extrovert, you might have totally different personalities than the person that you're speaking with. So how? And then the last section is questions. And so I'm a huge fan of practical tools, because if I can't go apply it, it's just going to sit on my shelf and I'm never actually going to do anything with it. So part 3 is chock full of hundreds of questions arranged around different life stages that you can ask yourself or you can ask somebody else in a really friendly, non-threatening, non-weird way to have these conversations.
When you understand the foundation of a healthy relationship, let's talk about that. When it comes to how people can understand the approach of how we observe our relationship, just status, if you will. Because there's times in today's world where people just cut people off because of some small little detail that can be temporary.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the habit of the question habit, how do you explore that in your book on how people can test their status on their health side of the relationship and ways they can make that heal or get better?
Yeah, such a great question, Shemaiah. Let's face it, we've all been antagonized by questions before. We can all think of them. I mean, you could probably think of some right now. Are you going to wear that? What were you thinking? Or how could you be so rude? These are questions that are weaponized. I call them weaponized questions. And so really what we're doing is we're pulling back a bit and thinking, why am I asking this question? What's my purpose for asking this question? And how can I do it in a way that fosters a relationship? And sometimes it's as simple as leaning in a little bit and making your face look a little pleasant instead of scowling and frowning, right? So you've got this open facial expression with interest, and you raise your eyebrows and you lean in a little bit, and just those simple nonverbal things communicate to someone, you're important to me and I want to hear what you have to say. And another thing that comes to mind, Shemaiah, is the beauty of a pause. The beauty of silence. Because often I will get uncomfortable and awkward, so I might ask a question, and then the other person is still thinking, but I'm going to fill that thinking time with my own pontifications that I'm sure are wise and valuable. But the truth of the matter is, it's okay to have silence in a conversation, and in fact, you want it in a relationship. So thinking through those really practical ways of how can I communicate to someone else, this person is important to me.
Funny you said that, because it made me think about my old days, community college in Ann Arbor, Michigan, before I went to Toledo. And I had a jazz teacher. He broke down the whole patterns of jazz music and how it's all about the call and the response. Because every instrument has a chance to shine. Yeah. And jazz is almost like a branch off of gospel music, right? So it's very spiritual, it's very active, but it's also fluid. So it has, I hate to be technical and deep mode, but it's like when you are in the song key, right, and you're playing within the scale. In jazz music, when a certain instrument like a guitar does a riff, it does a certain call. Well, it makes room. Because you're talking about silence, it makes room to be quiet for the other instrument to respond. So the call and respond, it's like building rapport. And I'm using that analogy to tie to the topic, because sometimes the questions can birth new amazing answers. So that call, that response, that building rapport, it ties into the whole concept of building that relationship. Yeah. Someone has to make the call and someone has to respond to it.
I love it. And I love that analogy. It's so beautiful, because I can think of specific conversations that I've had where it felt like a discordant, just bang on the piano. Right? If we take this idea of jazz, and it was like, oh, that one didn't work, right? But with jazz, you keep going. And you adapt, and the music goes on and it flows, and maybe even that discordant note becomes a part of it. And jazz is such a beautiful example of what we're hoping for as people in relationship, as people that live in community, because we are not, in silos all by ourselves. We want to build relationships, and we're designed for them. And jazz is such a beautiful example of that, because there are going to be some discordant notes, but the music goes on, and the story goes on, and we make space for other people and other instruments to share their riffs.
In the book, when you look at some of the common barriers when it comes to asking meaningful questions, what are some of the things that people maybe see as a barrier, and how are there some ways that we can overcome those? Yeah,
such a good question. The first barrier that comes to mind, because it's the one I think I've struggled with and worked through the most, is insecurity. And insecurity, it really looks a lot like pride. Like insecurity becomes pride when it's allowed to fester. And so if we could let's imagine a parent that's maybe more authority driven, then they might be bringing an insecurity to a conversation. I want my child to believe the things I do. I want this kid to look a certain way, do certain things, act certain ways. And if they don't do that, does that reflect on me as a bad parent? That's insecurity in so many ways. And so insecurity is definitely something that will shut down a conversation. And so I love that every opportunity is an opportunity to assess, why am I here? Like, why am I having this conversation? What's the outcome that I'm hoping for? And that can be a beautiful way to say, wait a minute, let's maybe bring this around from a different perspective. So we talked about insecurity, talked about pride. We all are people bringing our own experiences, our own story, our own worldview, and I have one and you have one, and we bring those to our conversation. And so those can be either barriers or bridges, depending on the two people involved in the conversation. And so if we can use it as a bridge to connect with someone else, that's a beautiful thing. And if not, it's going to be a barrier.
That's a good point, because the whole bridge concept, going back to the faith, I do believe in faith myself, and I believe that is a concept that is practiced in the faith world as well. There is a bridge that makes a connection to the person, and it actually draws the person to be closer to the source, right? It allows them to realize that there's actually another way doing this thing called life. Like, you don't have to build a barrier and isolate yourself, but you actually be invited to experience a better fulfilled life. So my next question would be, what types of questions can help a person discover God and understand the uniqueness of the opportunity he can potentially provide to that person and have a fulfilling life?
Yeah. I'm going to go really big for a minute, if that's okay with you, Shemaiah. I passionately believe that there's no question we can't ask God. Like, God made us to be curious. He made us to ask questions. And the reality is that we live in a world that's confusing. And that doesn't make sense. And that often you look at things and you think, wow, what's going on here? And so really, that fundamental to who we are is asking questions, and the best place we can take those is to take them to God. Now, as a believer, as a Christian, I see that so many answers are in God's Word, the Bible, and so many questions are in God's Word, the Bible. And that's actually another thing that started me on this process, was seeing, like, my whole life is an exclamation point. You talked about a peppy personality.
This is good. If you need that.
I am an exclamation point. And with that, we can see how many question marks are in the Bible. It's astounding. Depending on which version of the Bible you're reading, it's like 1,800 or more questions in the Bible that get asked. There's a reason for that. So we have this confidence that we can take any question to God and that we can ask that. And as we read the Bible, as we are consistently looking in God's Word for answers, I believe that we're going to find those answers. God says in James, he says, draw close to me and I'm going to draw close to you. That's a promise. And any person, whether they believe in God or not, can do that and ask questions, and God is going to draw close to them.
Man, see, that's why I love the show, I Am Refocused Radio, because it never fails. Every time I have an interview with someone who, like, hits out the park, we never go on script. It just naturally flows. And going back to my college days, just what you just said there about God, it makes you think about, like, when you have to take a required course in order to be qualified for the next one. It's called a prerequisite. So I feel like that's what God does in our life. He gives us prerequisites that we must meet in order for him to take us to the next level. So inside your book, when it comes to relationships, how does personal growth take a play in how we mature as we develop these relationships?
Yeah, personal growth is so huge. And I love learning. I love books that are self-help books and books that are going to make me resources that are going to make me a better parent, a better spouse, a better coworker, a better human, right? But really what I've discovered, Shemaiah, is that when I focus on myself, like when I draw, not in a selfish way, but I'm drawing that circle around myself and taking care of the things that I know I need to take care of personally, then it's such a beautiful place. It's such a better place to be than trying to fix everybody else's problems. Because, so that personal growth is any question that we might think, oh man, that would be a great question to ask so-and-so, right? But I wonder, what would it look like if we first asked ourselves that question? That's a good point. And if we first really unpacked it ourselves and, thinking even, like, let's just think super simple, but like, who is a group of people that I love supporting and caring for? Like, if I ask that question myself, it's going to fundamentally shape which opportunities I say yes to, which things I say no to, where I put my effort and my focus. And that's a really, really good thing. And then as I think through and work out that answer, I can help other people with that too, if they're curious.
That's good.
And so if I think to myself, what is an effective way that I could reach this group of people or minister to them? And I'm brainstorming and I come up with those effective ways to do it. Then I have a matrix by which I can evaluate opportunities, by which I could go then talk to another mentor and say, hey, in your experience, which of these were effective in your life? So it's this really focusing, honing tool when we, as you're talking about, focus on ourselves first for the purpose of focusing on others.
And a lot of times, especially this year, the word self-awareness has always been floating in these shows because in order for a person to truly experience growth, they have to understand where they fall as far as like on the map. Where are you right now in this very moment? Not necessarily where do you want to be, but truthfully, when you're honest with your life and you see where God's trying to take you, you can't understand where he's trying to take you if you don't understand where you are.
Yeah.
And touch on that because in order for you to have any fruitful relationship, you have to be truthful to actually where you are as a person.
Man. 100%. Yeah. Wherever you are is a great place to start. And that's a beautiful thing. But if you don't know where you are, it doesn't matter. I remember the story in Alice in Wonderland. Alice comes to a fork in the road, and she sees the Cheshire cat in the tree. And so she looks at the fork in the road, and she says, which way should I go? And the Cheshire cat says, well, which way are you going? Which way are you heading? And she says, I don't know. And then the Cheshire cat replies, then it doesn't matter. Any road will take you there.
That's good.
And yeah, we have.
I know you're preaching too.
Crossroad. We have these crossroads at us every day, and if we don't know where we're going, if we don't know where we are, we're never going to get there.
Man, that's good because it's easy for us. I just literally talked to this about this topic with a person yesterday. It's easy to have it's their fault mentality. And it's almost like a scapegoat. Like, it takes less energy to blame someone else than it does to actually self-reflect and say, here's a question, am I contributing to the problem?
Yeah.
We don't want to ask that
I hate that question.
We want to ask it for everybody else.
Yes.
Like, oh yeah, here's their laundry list of why they're the issue.
Yes.
But we never want to actually look in the mirror and say, hold up. What I say doesn't match what I do. And I can see the results in the mirror.
Yeah. And when we ask ourselves those big questions, is there a part I'm playing? What part am I playing in this situation? It draws that circle around us in a way that we can actually take action on it. Because we can't control the actions of other people, but we can affect our own hearts, our own minds, our own change. And when you ask those big questions, what would it look like for me to come into this in a healthy way? Does it mean I should not come into this conversation? Because that would be the most loving, truthful, healthy thing to say. So asking ourselves those big questions, those are really important, Shemaya.
Once again, listen, I'm Refocused Radio. I can't believe time just flew out like that, but we're talking to our special guest, Mandy Pallock, and her book that you can get on Amazon right now. It is The Question Habit, and I'm telling you, you want to learn how you can engage in your community and probably engage with your family in a better way. This is the book that you probably want to take seriously and just read it for yourself and learn from all the different parts of the book that will allow you to grow, because that's what we need to do. We want to put that on our radar that I want to grow. And if you truly want to grow, I think someone said, I'm paraphrasing it, but someone said you don't actually move until you get tired of where you are.
Yeah. Wherever you are is a great place to start. It just might be a lousy place to end up.
If someone's listening right now and they want to not just support your book, but follow you online, what's the best way they can keep in touch?
Yeah, thequestionhabit.com is a good jumping off space where someone could then connect with me on Instagram or social media and then snag the book. And the book is available in print or audiobook on Audible. If somebody's more the listen to it while you walk around the block or go pick up the kids, that's another way to do it.
Well, like always, been talking to our guest, Mandy Pallock. I want to say to you, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. I really am grateful to be here.